Dr. Phillips, thanks for being here. How you doing this afternoon?
Doing pretty good.
Good. You a licensed physician in the state of South Carolina?
I am.
All right. And what specifically is it that you do for a living?
I am a forensic pathologist.
That sounds a little bit technical. Did you have to have specialized schooling or training to obtain that licensure?
Yes, a forensic pathologist is a medical doctor trained in the field of pathology, and the specific part of pathology would be forensic pathology, and that is the field where I perform autopsies.
And approximately how many autopsies have you performed over the course of your career?
At least 1,000.
And where did you attend school?
I went to undergraduate school at New York University for anthropology. I then completed a graduate degree, a master's in human nutrition. Went to medical school, State University of New York, upstate. Then 4 years of additional training, residency training in pathology, and I did that in Massachusetts before coming down to South Carolina for 1 more year of training in forensic pathology.
Okay. And are you a special member or a member of any special groups or other associations connected with pathology?
Yes.
And what are those?
I am a member of the National Association of Medical Examiners.
Your Honor, I would stipulate that Dr. Phillips is, in fact, an eminently qualified forensic pathologist and certainly qualified to testify here.
Well, she is indeed qualified in that way. Madam Forelady, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, ordinarily a witness, a lay witness, can only testify as to what they heard, saw, and felt. An expert witness is an exception to that. Because of their training in a certain science or field, they're allowed to testify as to what they heard, saw, and felt, and render opinions in that area if this court deems them qualified to do so. She is indeed qualified. Pay very close attention to her testimony, and you can evaluate it just like you would any other evidence. You're not to believe an expert witness's testimony merely by virtue of the fact that they're an expert. Pay very close attention. Yes.
Thank you, Your Honor. May it please the court. Did you have the occasion to perform an autopsy on one Emily Richitell?
Yes.
Okay, and when did you do that?
I performed that autopsy on the 25th of July, 2022.
Okay, and what was the condition of the body when you received it?
All of the autopsies that I perform, the body is brought to us in a bag and then transferred onto our autopsy table. At that time, before it's even touched, we take photographs. It still has usually the clothing that they were wearing and any blood, debris, or other things that may get on the surface of the body. In this case, I believe she was wearing some clothing, and there was some blood associated with the injuries on her body.
Okay. And after viewing the body, could you observe any evidence of injury on Emily Richitell?
Yes.
And where was that located?
She had a gunshot wound to the head, and there were a few scattered bruises on the body.
Okay. And from your work at the autopsy, could you determine the approximate trajectory of the gunshot wound that entered the head?
Yes, I can give you that directly from my report. It is going from left to right, slightly up and slightly forward, and that is with the body in an anatomic position, not moving, head straight forward. So it's entering on the left, going to the right, going slightly up with the head facing straight forward. Does not take into consideration any movement of the body.
And more specifically, could you demonstrate to the jury the approximate location of the entrance wound?
The entrance wound in this case is located in the left side of the head in the back, so towards the back left side of the head.
And the approximate exit wound?
The exit wound is on the right side, also towards the back of the head, so right side more towards the back of the head than the front.
Okay. And what are the symptoms that would be associated with a wound of this nature?
Gunshot wounds to the head are usually rapidly fatal. In this case, she had a number of injuries that involved the skull, the brain, and the brain stem. And because of those injuries, there was bleeding into the cranial cavity and blood was coming out of the ears.
Now, is it always necessarily true that a gunshot wound to the head is equivalent to the immediate cessation of life?
It is not. It depends on what is injured. Certain parts of the brain can receive an injury and not be immediately fatal. There can be signs of life after that.
And what parts of the brain were injured due to this gunshot?
In this case, I have injury to the bilateral occipital lobes and contusions or bruising on the brain in the parietal and occipital lobes. So the parietal lobes are the top side parts of your brain, and your occipital lobes sit in the back of your skull towards almost the base of the skull. And they're primarily involved in sensation. For your occipital lobes, that's where your visual cortex lies, so it affects your ability to see. And your parietal lobes will be senses of touch and sensation of feelings, things like that.
After a gunshot wound of this manner, could you determine whether or not the body, as you observed it, may have continued life for a short period of time?
Yes, we could assume that there would be some small signs of life. I cannot give you a timeline for that, so I could tell you it's possible that you can survive for minutes, but I couldn't tell you that she survived for minutes.
And to a reasonable degree of medical certainty, have you formed an opinion on the cause and manner of death of Emily Richitell?
Yes.
And what is that?
The cause of death is the gunshot wound to the head, and the manner would be homicide.
And did you also have the opportunity to perform an autopsy on one John Ashley Altman?
Yes.
And what was the date of that autopsy?
That autopsy was performed on the same day. That would be July 25th, 2022.
Okay. And what was the condition of the body as you first observed it?
In this case, he was also wearing some clothing. There was some dirt and debris on the outer surface of the body, including blood from the injuries.
And after viewing the body, did you observe any evidence of injury on the body?
Yes.
And where was that?
In this case, he had a gunshot wound to the head. There was a gunshot wound to the left axilla. The axilla is just a fancy way of saying the armpit. And there was also a gunshot wound to the left arm.
And if we might, let's focus on the gunshot wound to the left arm and work our way backwards, if we may.
Okay.
Can you tell us more about that?
Yes, I can. The gunshot wound on the left arm was relatively superficial, meaning it didn't go in very deep. It went through the skin. There was some hemorrhage or bleeding underneath the skin overlying the muscle, but there was no wound track through the arm or the muscle in the arm. There was no projectile associated with this gunshot wound. It was very superficial, so likely possible a projectile that came into contact with the body without direct force, so it didn't come straight out of the gun hitting the body. The next gunshot wound is to the left axilla, so the left armpit region, towards the back of the armpit. It goes in through the body and perforates, goes through the left lung, and then becomes lodged, the bullet that is, becomes lodged in near the thoracic vertebral body, so that's the spinal column. The thoracic vertebrae are in the torso region, and that would be in the back. And with that disruption of the thoracic vertebra, there's also injury to the spinal cord. When you injure the spinal cord in that area, it reduces your ability to use anything below that level. So the 9th thoracic vertebra injury, pretty much you cannot use your lower extremities, your legs. That one, we did recover a projectile from the T9 vertebra region, and it was traveling from the left axillary region to the T9 vertebra, left to right, down, and slightly back to front. The last gunshot wound is the gunshot wound to the head. This consisted of somewhat two injuries where it enters at the earlobe on the left and it grazes behind the earlobe before entering into the head behind the earlobe. This gunshot wound travels through the head and exits on the right side of the forehead. Right side of the forehead. And this gunshot wound goes through, again, the skull, the brain, and there is some injury around the spinal cord, up around the top of the spinal cord. So there is blood that's pooling in that area and blood that's in the parenchyma of the brain or the tissue of the brain. This gunshot wound is traveling from left to right, back to front, and slightly up.
Would you please demonstrate where the entrance wound to the gunshot to the head might be?
The entrance wound for the gunshot to the head, excuse me, is at the left earlobe. It grazes behind it and then goes in the head in this general region.
And on the previous gunshot wound to the left
Axilla.
to the left axilla that buries itself in the spinal column, did you indicate that had perforated a lung?
Yes.
Okay, and what would be the symptoms of a wound of that nature?
When you have a perforating injury to your lung is an organ that's usually filled with a lot of blood. That's where your blood goes to get oxygen. So damage to that tissue will bleed quite profusely, and that blood pools in the chest cavity around the lung, preventing it from functioning normally, even if it didn't have an injury.
Is that gunshot wound fatal?
That gunshot wound is potentially fatal. With immediate treatment, it's potentially something that one could recover from. You would still have some residual effects of that injury, but it is potentially fatal.
Okay. And did you indicate that you pulled a bullet out of that area?
Yes.
And we'll show you now what's already in evidence. It states 53. I'll just ask you if you recognize this.
It looks like the bullet that I removed from the body, but I cannot be sure. I don't see our envelope or a marking.
Okay. And did you turn over a bullet like that to Robert Tucker with the Georgetown County Sheriff's Office?
Yes.
And back to the gunshot wound to the head. What are the symptoms of a wound of that nature?
This gunshot wound is likely immediately fatal. We have bleeding that is over the brain. There is bleeding within the brain. There is damage to the frontal parietal lobes. So your frontal lobes sit in the front of the brain, parietal along the sides and the top. There's injury to the left temporal lobe. Excuse me. And your temporal lobe sits right along the side of your temple. There is that blood around the spinal cord up at the top. Thank you. And the blood at the spinal cord, it creates, along with that damage to the brain, which is now not functioning, it creates a difficulty with the brainstem functioning normally, and your brainstem is required for many of the things that keeps you alive: breathing, your heart beating, everything that signals your body to keep alive. So those injuries are relatively instantly lethal.
And to a reasonable degree of medical certainty, did you form an opinion concerning the cause of death, cause and manner of death of John Ashley Altman?
I did.
Okay, and what is that?
The cause of death in this case are the gunshot wounds to the head and the left axilla, and the manner is homicide.
And other than the wounds regarding both of the individuals discussed today, Emily Richitell and John Ashley Altman, other than the wounds you observed, did the organs of those individuals appear to be functioning well?
I believe there were no significant natural diseases in either body that I identified.
I'm showing you now. What's been marked as states 55, 54. Did you type up a report for these autopsies?
Yes.
I'll show you now what's marked for identification purposes as states 54 and 55.
Okay.
Can you tell me what these are?
These are complete copies of the autopsy reports that I generated for the two decedents in this case.
Okay. And are these fair and accurate depictions of the copies as you printed them?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time, statement seek to introduce what's been marked for identification purposes as states 54 and 55.
Any
I have
objection?
no objections
They're
whatsoever.
into evidence without objection from defense.